We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundation of Glass. Russell Montgomery stepped out of his Mercedes G-Wagon onto the driveway of his colonial-style Virginia estate, loosening his tie after another 14-hour day. At 49, he'd built Montgomery Security Solutions from nothing into a private military contractor that specialized in high-risk extraction operations and executive protection. The scars on his knuckles and the barely noticeable limp from his time as a Navy SEAL were the only outward signs of his previous life. Inside, the house was quiet. His wife, Vanessa, once a runway model turned interior designer, had left a note about attending a wedding planning session with her daughter, Olivia. Russell smiled wearily. His only child was getting married in 3 months to a young doctor named Patrick. Though Russell found the man somewhat spineless, he kept those thoughts to himself. Olivia's happiness came first. Russell poured himself 2 fingers of Macallan 25 and settled into his study. On the mahogany desk sat framed photos, one of Olivia's graduation from Georgetown, another of him and Vanessa renewing their vows in Santorini for their 20th anniversary 2 years ago. The renewal had been his idea, a desperate attempt to rekindle what had grown cold. The signs had been there for months. Vanessa's sudden interest in fitness, the late nights at client consultations, the passcode on her phone that hadn't existed for 22 years of marriage. Russell wasn't naive, but something in him refused to accept what was happening. He'd survived firefights in Fallujah with fewer anxieties than he felt about his own marriage. "You're paranoid," Russ, his old friend and business partner Dale Harper, had told him over drinks last week. Not every marriage breakdown involved cheating. Dale didn't know that Russell had already hired Troy Burnett, a former employee and top-notch investigator. Troy's reports sat locked in Russell's office safe, unopened. Some truths you need to see for yourself before you can believe them. Russell's phone buzzed. A text from Olivia. "Last-minute meeting with Flores tomorrow at 10. Need your input on boutonnieres." He smiled, texting back confirmation. At least with Olivia, things were simple. She'd always been Daddy's little girl, from a moment he'd taught her to fish at their lake house in Maine to their scuba diving trip to celebrate her medical school acceptance. Even with his demanding career, he'd never missed a recital, a game, or a father-daughter dance. That night, Russell went to bed alone again. Vanessa returned after midnight, slipping in quietly, smelling of expensive wine and someone else's cologne. Russell lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he would finally open Troy's reports. Chapter 2. The Exclusion. Russell arrived at Magnolia Gardens precisely at 10 a.m., dressed in a tailored Navy suit. The venue coordinator, a woman with a permanent smile, greeted him. "I'm here for the Olivia Montgomery wedding planning session," Russell said, checking his watch. The woman's smile faltered. "Oh, Mr. Montgomery, there's been a change of schedule. The Montgomery party arrived an hour ago and is nearly finished." Russell frowned. "There must be a mistake. My daughter texted me 10 a.m. Let me check." She tapped at her tablet. Yes, the appointment was moved to 9 a.m. 3 days ago. A cold feeling settled in Russell's stomach as he thanked her and walked toward the garden. Through the French doors, he could see them, Vanessa, Olivia, and Patrick, laughing with a tall man Russell had never seen before. As Russell approached, the conversation stopped abruptly. Olivia's face registered shock, then something like guilt. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "You asked me to come at 10, Russell replied evenly, eyes moving between his daughter and wife. "For boutonnieres." Vanessa stepped forward smoothly. "Oh, Russ, we moved it earlier. Didn't Olivia tell you?" "Must have slipped my mind," Olivia said, not meeting his eyes. Russell nodded at the stranger, who stepped forward with practiced confidence. "Blake Turner," the man introduced himself, extending a manicured hand. "I'm helping with some of the arrangements." Russell shook the hand briefly, noting the expensive watch, the too familiar way Vanessa stood beside him. "Blake is a close friend," Vanessa added. "He's been invaluable with the planning." "I see," Russell said. "And what exactly is your role in my daughter's wedding?" An uncomfortable silence fell. Patrick, ever conflict-averse, stared at his shoes. Blake is walking me down the aisle, Dad, Olivia finally said. The words hit Russell like a physical blow. Excuse me. Don't make a scene, Vanessa hissed. We've been trying to find the right time to tell you, Olivia continued, her voice small. Blake has been like a second father to me these past few years. Since you were always working. Working to pay for this wedding, Russell finished, his voice dangerously calm. Working to give you everything. It's not about the money, Olivia protested. Then what is it about? Russell asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like I'm being replaced. You're just so intense, Dad. You intimidate Patrick's family. Blake is more approachable. Russell looked at Blake, who had the decency to appear uncomfortable. Then at Patrick, who wouldn't meet his eyes. Finally, at Vanessa, whose expression held something close to satisfaction. I see, Russell said again, his military training keeping his emotions locked down tight. Well, I wouldn't want to impose my presence where it's not wanted. Don't be so dramatic, Vanessa said dismissively. You're still invited to the ceremony. You'll just be sitting with the other guests. It's just a stupid wedding, Dad, Olivia added, her tone suddenly hardening to match her mother's. Why do you always have to make everything so complicated? Vanessa touched Blake's arm in a gesture far too intimate. Russell always overreacts. It's why we needed to handle things this way. Russell stared at his wife and daughter, these strangers wearing familiar faces. 22 years of marriage. 25 years of fatherhood. All of it crumbling before his eyes. I understand completely, he said, his voice like ice. Thank you for clarifying my position in this family. He turned and walked away, ignoring their calls. In his car, he finally opened Troy's reports. The photographs inside confirmed everything. Vanessa and Blake together for over 3 years. Blake at Olivia's medical school graduation. Family dinners Russell had missed due to work. His replacement had been groomed long ago, with his daughter's complicity. Russell started the car, made a call to Dale, and began a plan. Chapter 3. The Decision. Russell spent the next 48 hours in complete silence, his phone turned off. He moved methodically through the motions of his life, while something fundamentally changed inside him. The business of betrayal required careful attention. In his downtown office, Dale watched with concern as Russell methodically went through financial documents. You sure about this, Russ? Dale asked, pushing his salt and pepper hair back. It's extreme. They've been planning this for years, Russell replied, sliding Troy's report across the desk. Look at the dates. This isn't a fling. It's a replacement operation. Dale whistled as he flipped through the photographs. Blake Turner, wait, isn't he? Vanessa's college boyfriend before she met me. Apparently, they reconnected at a charity function while I was in Dubai securing the government contract. Russell's voice remained clinical. Turner divorced his wife the following month. And Olivia knew. Knew? She facilitated. There are text messages arranging accidental meetings when I was away. Dinners I wasn't invited to. Family trips rescheduled to times I couldn't attend. Dale put down the file. What's your play? Russell slid a brochure across the desk. Cape Town. That wildlife photography expedition I've been postponing for years. 3 weeks in remote locations, starting next Monday. During the wedding? Precisely during the wedding. Dale leaned back. They'll try to stop you. They could try. Russell had already set things in motion. He'd transferred his personal funds, earned before the marriage, to accounts Vanessa couldn't access. The joint accounts remained untouched. This wasn't about money. He'd spoken with his lawyer about potential divorce proceedings, but instructed him to take no action yet. That evening, Russell returned home to find Vanessa waiting, her perfect features arranged in an expression of concerned irritation. Where have you been? She demanded. We've been calling for days. Working, Russell replied simply, pouring himself a drink. We need to talk about your behavior at the venue. Olivia is upset. Is she? Russell sipped his whiskey. Good. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've had a revelation, Vanessa. For years, I've been the intruder in my own family. The uninvited guest. Don't be ridiculous. So, I've decided to respect your wishes. Russell smiled thinly. I won't be attending the wedding. Vanessa stared. You can't do that. What will people say? They'll say whatever story you and Blake concoct. You're good at fiction. This is about Blake? For God's sake, Russell, he's just a friend helping with the wedding. Russell laughed. A friend who's been sleeping with my wife for 3 years? A friend who's taking my place with my daughter? That kind of friend. The color drained from Vanessa's face. You had me investigated? No, Vanessa. I had our company's overseas assets investigated, and you happened to appear in the periphery. Imagine my surprise. The doorbell rang. Russell checked his watch. That'll be my car to the airport. Airport. Vanessa stammered. Where are you going? Cape Town. That photography expedition I've mentioned for years, the one you always said was a waste of time. You can't leave now. The wedding is in 3 weeks. Russell picked up his packed suitcase from beside the door. As you and Olivia so eloquently put it, it's just a stupid wedding. And I'm apparently just an unnecessary complication. Vanessa's composure cracked. Russell, be reasonable. We can talk about this. We had years to talk. You chose deception instead. Russell opened the door to the waiting car. Give Blake my congratulations on his success. It was quite the long game. Russell, Vanessa's voice trembled. If you leave now, you'll regret it. Russell looked back at the woman he'd loved for half his life. Already regret the last 3 years. What's 3 more weeks? The door closed behind him with quiet finality. Chapter 4. Desperate Calls. Cape Town's natural beauty provided a stark contrast to the darkness Russell felt inside. His luxury safari lodge overlooked a vast expanse of wilderness, the anti-poaching security measures giving him a professional appreciation for the property. His satellite phone, the only connection to the outside world, recorded 78 missed calls in the first 48 hours. The messages range from Vanessa's cold fury to Olivia's tearful pleas. Russell listened to each one methodically, filing them away mentally as evidence of their panic rather than genuine remorse. Dad, please, Olivia sobbed in her 11th message. The rehearsal dinner is next week. People are asking questions. Grandma Montgomery is threatening not to come if you're not there. Russell sat on his private veranda, watching elephants at a distant watering hole through high-powered binoculars. His mother, Eleanor Montgomery, was a formidable woman who'd raised 3 sons after their father died in Vietnam. Her disapproval would be significant. The most interesting calls came from Blake Turner himself. Russell, this is Blake. I understand you're upset, but this is childish. Your actions are hurting Olivia, not punishing Vanessa or me. Be a man and face this properly. Russell almost admired the audacity. The man who'd systematically replaced him was questioning his manhood. On the 5th day, Dale called. They're getting desperate, Dale reported. Vanessa came to the office yesterday, created quite a scene. Blake tried a different approach, offered to buy your share of Montgomery security at a generous premium, so you could retire with dignity. Russell laughed genuinely for the first time in weeks. How thoughtful. There's more. Dale hesitated. They're spreading a story that you had a breakdown. Claiming your SEAL history gives you PTSD episodes. Building a narrative about your mental instability. Expected, Russell replied. What's our board saying? They're worried but holding. The Norton government contract negotiations are still on track. Good. And the other matter? Dale's voice lowered. Troy is everything you asked for. The offshore movements, the pattern of meetings, the financial arrangements. Blake's been planning something significant, using his relationship with Vanessa as cover for something bigger. I'm not surprised, Russell said. Blake Turner had been too calculated, too perfect in his infiltration of Russell's family. Such patience suggested ulterior motives beyond mere romantic conquest. Back in Virginia, the desperation escalated. Russell's phone lit up with a call from his daughter. He answered this time. Dad, Olivia sounded surprised he'd picked up. Where are you? On safari, Russell replied evenly. Watching elephants protect their young. It's quite educational. Dad, please. You have to come home. Everything's falling apart. The Hendersons canceled. They said they wouldn't attend if you weren't walking me down the aisle. Patrick's father is asking uncomfortable questions. How inconvenient for you. This isn't fair. Olivia's voice cracked. I know you're hurt, but this is my wedding. Indeed it is. Your wedding, your choice of who walks you down the aisle. My choice whether to attend. Mom says you're being manipulative, that you're trying to control everything by withdrawing. Russell watched as a bull elephant charged a young lion that had strayed too close to the herd. Is that what she says? Interesting analysis from a woman who's been manipulating all of us for years. It's not like that. Blake just understood me in ways you never tried to. The words clarified everything for Russell. I see. While I was building a life for us, working to give you everything, you felt misunderstood. Tell me, Olivia, how many of your medical school bills did Blake pay? How many nightmares did he sit through when you were little? How many training wheels did he take off your first bike? Silence stretched between them. Blake says you're having some kind of breakdown, Olivia finally said, her voice small. Blake seems to say many things, Russell replied. Perhaps you should ask him about the offshore accounts he's established using connections he gained through his relationship with your mother. Ask him about the properties purchased under shell companies. Ask him about his meetings with Anthony Vargas. Who's Anthony Vargas? Someone Blake should know, much less meet with 6 times in the past year. Someone whose connections would be highly valuable to a man looking to bypass certain international security protocols. You're not making sense. I'm making perfect sense, Olivia. You've just chosen not to see. Russell watched the elephant herd move protectively around their young. I have to go. The light is perfect for photography. Dad, wait. Russell ended the call and turned to find his safari guide, Winston, standing respectfully nearby. There's a call from the main lodge, sir. A woman named Eleanor Montgomery insists on speaking with you. His mother. Russell nodded. Tell her I'll call back in 10 minutes. When he did, Eleanor Montgomery didn't waste time with pleasantries. Russell James Montgomery, what the hell are you doing in Africa while your daughter's wedding falls apart? Hello, Mother. I'm well. Thank you for asking. Don't sass me, boy. I raised you better than this. Russell sighed. Did Vanessa tell you I wasn't invited to walk my own daughter down the aisle? That she and Olivia decided Blake Turner would make a better father figure? Silence. Explain. Russell did, concisely and completely. When he finished, his mother's voice had turned to steel. I see. And what are you going to do about it? I'm already doing it. Eleanor Montgomery had taught her sons to never start fights, but always finish them. Good. Call me when it's done. Chapter 5. The Blueprint of Vengeance. While Russell traced wildlife through his camera lens in South Africa, the foundation for his counterattack was being meticulously laid back home. Dale coordinated with Troy and their hand-picked team, executing Russell's carefully constructed plan. Russell had learned in the military that the best operations appeared random to outside observers while following a precise internal logic. His vengeance would be the same. Seemingly coincidental misfortunes befalling Blake and Vanessa that only they would recognize as deliberate. In his luxury lodge, Russell spread photographs across a teak table. Not wildlife shots, but surveillance photos Troy had sent. Blake meeting with Anthony Vargas, a known facilitator for weapons entering conflict zones under diplomatic cover. Blake with Russell's daughter at dinner, playing the doting stepfather. Blake and Vanessa in intimate moments they thought private. The satellite phone rang. Russell answered to hear Troy's raspy voice. It's confirmed, Troy said without preamble. Turner's using Montgomery security contracts as cover for independent operations. He's been approaching your clients, offering specialized services that bypass international oversight. And Vanessa? Unwitting as far as we can tell. She believes he's a successful investment consultant. The money he's showering her with comes from commissions on these side deals. Russell nodded to himself. And my daughter? Troy hesitated. She's being used, boss. Turner's leveraging his relationship with her to access medical supply chains. Perfect cover for moving other items. Cold fury crystallized inside Russell. Using him as a stepping stone in business was one thing. Manipulating his wife was personal but understandable in the amoral calculus of ambition. But exploiting his daughter crossed a line that demanded the harshest response. Implement Phase 2, Russell ordered. Phase 1 had been information gathering. Phase 2 was disruption. While Russell appeared to be isolated in Africa, his team moved with surgical precision. Blake's meetings with foreign contacts experienced mysterious interruptions. Potential clients received anonymous dossiers detailing Blake's connections to unsavory elements. Financial transactions began encountering unexplained regulatory holds. Back in Virginia, Vanessa grew increasingly desperate as the wedding approached. Her calls to Russell became frantic. "The country club canceled our booking," she said, panic evident. "They claim they double-booked, but I know they didn't. The florist suddenly can't fulfill our order. The caterer had a kitchen fire. Everything's falling apart, and Olivia blames me." "How unfortunate," Russell replied, examining photographs of a rare black rhino he'd captured that morning. "This is your doing, isn't it?" Vanessa's voice turned accusatory. "I'm in Africa, Vanessa. How could I possibly affect wedding arrangements in Virginia? You know people. You have connections." Russell chuckled. "So does Blake. Perhaps he can leverage his special relationships to solve these problems." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Ask him about Anthony Vargas. Ask him why our security clients are receiving warnings about unauthorized parallel operations." Silence fell. When Vanessa spoke again, her voice had changed. "What have you done, Russell?" "Nothing compared to what's coming," Russell replied softly. "You chose your side, Vanessa. Now you get to experience the consequences." The satellite phone rang again minutes after he'd hung up. This time it was Olivia. "Dad, what did you say to Mom?" "She's locked herself in the bathroom, crying. Perhaps she's finally confronting some uncomfortable truths about her new partner." "Stop this," Olivia pleaded. "Whatever you're doing, just stop. Come home. We can talk about everything. I believe a wise young woman recently told me it was just a stupid wedding. Surely these are just stupid complications." "I was wrong to say that," Olivia admitted. "I was wrong about a lot of things. Please, Dad." For a moment, Russell felt his resolve waver. Then he remembered the photographs of Blake using his daughter as cover for illegal operations. "A week ago, I offered to walk you down the aisle," Russell said quietly. "You chose differently. Now you live with that choice." In Virginia, Blake Turner was beginning to feel the noose tightening. His overseas contacts became suddenly unreachable. A routine customs inspection found irregularities in shipments connected to his shell companies. The Treasury Department flagged transactions for review. Blake called Russell directly, his smooth facade cracking. "Whatever game you're playing, Montgomery, it needs to stop. You're messing with things you don't understand." "On the contrary," Russell replied, "I understand perfectly. You wanted my life, my wife, my daughter, my business connections. You just didn't factor in what would happen if I decided to burn it all down rather than hand it over. Be reasonable." Blake's voice turned conciliatory. "We can work something out. A partnership." Russell laughed. "A partnership? You're offering me scraps from my own table. Think about Olivia. This wedding means everything to her. You should have considered that before using her medical connections to smuggle restricted items." "Yes, Blake, I know all about it. Every meeting, every transaction, every lie." Blake's voice turned cold. "You can't prove anything. I don't need to prove it. I just need to ensure the right people ask the right questions." Russell paused. "You have 48 hours to end your relationship with my wife and daughter and leave the state. After that, what happens is entirely on you." Blake's response was immediate. "You're threatening the wrong man, Montgomery. I've got friends you don't want as enemies." "So do I," Russell replied calmly. "The difference is mine are loyal." Chapter 6. Countermoves. Blake Turner had not built his operation by being easily intimidated. Within hours of Russell's ultimatum, he mobilized his own resources. If Russell wanted war, he would get one. Russell was preparing for a dawn photography expedition when Dale's urgent call came through. "They've moved against us," Dale reported. "The Norton contract is suddenly under review. 3 of our biggest clients received anonymous information suggesting we've been inflating security risk assessments to justify higher fees." Blake's counter-move, Russell noted calmly. "Predictable. There's more. Blake filed for an emergency protective order against you on Vanessa's behalf, claiming patterns of controlling behavior and veiled threats. They're painting you as a jealous husband with military training having a PTSD episode." Russell considered this. "Creative. What's our exposure? Minimal on the legal front. it's all fabricated. But perception-wise, it's gaining traction. The wedding narrative is shifting to daughter protects mother from controlling father. And Olivia Dale hesitated. She signed an affidavit supporting Vanessa's claims. Says you've been emotionally manipulative for years. That stung more than Russell wanted to admit. I see. What's our play? Accelerate the timeline. Implement Phase 3 immediately. Phase 3 was the endgame. The complete dismantling of Blake Turner's carefully constructed facade. In Virginia, the first domino fell when Blake received a call from his banker. His accounts had been frozen, pending an investigation into suspicious international transfers. The second domino was a visit from federal agents asking pointed questions about his connection to Anthony Vargas and shipments that had disappeared in transit to conflict zones. The third was the arrival of comprehensive files to key media contacts detailing Blake's systematic insertion into the Montgomery family, complete with time-stamped photographs and financial transactions. Blake called Russell in a fury. You think this will work? I've got insurance policies you can't imagine. Like the photos of you with the Ukrainian ministers? Or the encrypted drives in your lake house safe? I have them all, Blake. Blake's momentary silence confirmed Russell's hit. You're bluffing. Check your safe. The curse that followed told Russell everything. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Your daughter's wedding is in 3 days. I promise you'll regret this. 3 days? Russell feigned surprise. I thought it was next week. How time flies when you're dismantling someone's criminal enterprise. Vanessa called next, her voice shaking with rage. Federal agents just left our house. They took Blake's computers, his files. They questioned Olivia about medical supply shipments. What have you done? I've done what you failed to do, Vanessa. I protected our daughter from a man using her for his own purposes. Blake loves Olivia like his own. Blake loves what Olivia provides. Legitimate access to medical supply, chains perfect for smuggling. Ask yourself why a successful investment consultant would need such connections. Vanessa fell silent. The protective order was a nice touch, Russell continued, but hard to maintain when Blake's facing federal charges. You're destroying Olivia's wedding. Her future. No, I'm saving her from a future tied to a criminal. The difference matters. In a final desperate move, Blake attempted to leverage his remaining connections to strike directly at Montgomery Security. Rumors circulated among clients about financial irregularities. A former employee suddenly came forward with harassment allegations. The company's banking partners received anonymous tips about compliance failures. Dale called with the update. They're hitting us from all sides. The board is getting nervous. Let them, Russell replied. It's time to spring the trap. For months, Russell had suspected Blake was attempting to position himself to take over Montgomery Security. The attacks confirmed his theory. Now it was time to reveal that Russell had been anticipating this move all along. Russell placed a call to Eleanor Montgomery. Mother, it's time. Eleanor Montgomery, major shareholder and chairman emeritus of Montgomery Security, had been waiting for this call. The board meets in an hour. I'll handle it. The Montgomery Security Board of Directors convened an emergency session, ostensibly to address the crisis engulfing the company. Blake Turner, having leveraged his relationship with Vanessa to secure investor support, arrived expecting to propose a stability plan that would effectively give him control. Instead, he found Eleanor Montgomery presiding, with video screens showing Russell joining remotely from South Africa. Gentlemen, ladies, Russell began. I believe Mr. Turner has a proposal for us regarding the future of Montgomery Security. Blake hesitated, thrown by Russell's apparent cooperation. Yes, given the current instability, I've secured backing to provide immediate liquidity and leadership transition. How fascinating, Eleanor commented dryly. Perhaps before we proceed, we should address the federal investigation into Mr. Turner's use of our company's contracts as cover for unauthorized arms shipments. The room froze. Blake's face drained of color. That's absurd, he stammered. These are baseless allegations. Actually, Russell interrupted, they're quite well-based. Would you like to see the evidence? Or shall we simply wait for the indictments already being prepared? Blake stood. This meeting is a sham. I don't have to listen to these accusations. Sit down, Mr. Turner. Eleanor commanded with such authority that Blake instinctively complied. You came to take my son's company. Did you really think we wouldn't be prepared? One by one, board members revealed their knowledge of Blake's actions, his attempts to manipulate Montgomery security contracts, his use of Olivia's medical connections. The crisis had been manufactured to force Blake to show his hand. You've lost, Blake, Russell said quietly. The only question now is how much you take down with you. Chapter 7. The Execution. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday at Magnolia Gardens. By Thursday morning, the venue called to inform Vanessa that they had to cancel due to structural concerns that mysteriously appeared overnight. The custom wedding dress Olivia had ordered from Paris was accidentally delivered to Seattle. The officiant had a sudden family emergency requiring immediate travel overseas. Half the guest list received calls that the wedding had been postponed, while the other half was told the location had changed to a venue 3 hours away. Vanessa was in full meltdown, alternating between rage and despair. Olivia had stopped eating, her bridal glow replaced by dark circles and a haunted expression. Blake, meanwhile, was fighting for his freedom. Federal agents had executed search warrants on his properties, finding enough evidence to hold him for questioning. His financial accounts remained frozen. His overseas contacts had gone silent, prey to their own self-preservation instincts. Russell watched it all unfold from his luxury lodge in Africa, receiving regular updates from Dale and Troy. The chaos wasn't merely punitive. It was strategic, designed to create maximum pressure at the moment when Blake would be most vulnerable. 48 hours before the wedding, Blake was released from federal custody on strict conditions. No international travel, regular check-ins, and substantial bail. His first call was to Russell. You've made your point, Blake said, his voice ragged. Name your price to end this. You misunderstand, Russell replied calmly. This isn't a negotiation. It's an execution. For God's sake, think about Olivia. I'm thinking of nothing else. Then stop this madness. Let the wedding proceed. Afterward, I'll disappear. You'll never hear from me again. Russell considered this. An interesting proposal, but inadequate. What do you want? Blake demanded. I want you to tell Olivia the truth. About everything. How you used her. How you manipulated her feelings toward me to create distance. How you exploited her medical connections for your smuggling operations. That would destroy her. Perhaps. Or perhaps it would free her. Blake's desperation was palpable. I can't do that. Then I can't stop what's coming. Olivia called next, her voice barely recognizable through tears. Dad, please. Everything's falling apart. The venue canceled. My dress is missing. Half the guests think the wedding's not happening. I'm sorry to hear that, Russell said, meaning it despite everything. He had never wanted to hurt his daughter. This is your doing, isn't it? Olivia accused. Your revenge for not being chosen to walk me down the aisle. No, Olivia. This is the consequence of Blake Turner's actions catching up to him. Ask him about the federal investigation. Ask him why he was really interested in your medical supply connections. What are you talking about? Ask him, then call me back. 3 hours later, Olivia called again. This time, her voice was dead. Blake's been arrested again. They say he was trying to board a private plane to leave the country. I'm not surprised. Before they took him, he told me things about using my hospital access for smuggling medical supplies to countries under sanction. He said it was humanitarian, but the FBI says it wasn't medical supplies at all. Her voice caught. He was using me. All this time. Russell closed his eyes, the victory hollow. I'm sorry, Olivia. No, you're not. She shot back, anger breaking through the shock. You're enjoying this. Your perfect revenge. I never wanted you hurt. Then what did you want? She cried. To destroy my wedding? Congratulations, mission accomplished. To ruin Mom's life? Done. To prove you were right all along? Fine, you win. Russell sighed. I wanted you safe from a man who saw you as a means to an end. I wanted your mother to face the consequences of her choices. And yes, I wanted Blake Turner to lose everything he tried to take from me. Silence fell between them. The wedding's off, Olivia finally said. I called Patrick, told him everything. He said he needed time to think. I see. No, you don't see. You don't see anything except your own pain. Your own pride. Olivia's voice hardened. I hope Africa was worth it, Dad. I hope your revenge tastes sweet. Because you've lost me forever. The call ended. Russell sat motionless on his veranda, watching the African sunset paint the sky in brutal reds. The victory he'd engineered felt hollow in the face of his daughter's pain. Dale called with an update. Blake's being held without bail this time. Attempted flight risk. The feds found evidence on his backup drives connecting him to 3 separate smuggling operations. Vanessa's been questioned, but not charged. They believe she was unaware of the criminal aspects. And Olivia? Cleared completely. The evidence shows she was manipulated, not complicit. Dale paused. She's moved out of the house. Staying with your mother, of all people. Russell raised an eyebrow. His mother had chosen sides, and not the one he expected. Your flight home is confirmed for tomorrow, Dale continued. Sure you want to return now? It's going to be messy. Russell looked out at the African wilderness one last time. It's time to finish what I started. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. Russell's private jet touched down at Dulles International Airport under threatening skies. Rain pelted the tarmac as he descended the stairs, a fitting homecoming for the storm he'd created. Dale met him at the terminal, concern evident in his expression. You should know, your return isn't a secret. Reporters are waiting outside. Vanessa's given several interviews portraying herself as the victim of your vendetta against Blake. And my mother hasn't spoken publicly, but she's been hosting Olivia at her estate. Russell nodded. Eleanor Montgomery rarely acted without purpose. Her sheltering Olivia sent a clear message. She was protecting family, but not necessarily taking sides. The media gauntlet outside was predictable. Cameras flashed as Russell moved through the crowd, ignoring questions about his abandonment of his daughter's wedding, about Blake Turner's arrest, about the implosion of his family. His first stop wasn't home, but the federal building downtown, where he provided formal statements about Blake's operations and how they had intersected with Montgomery security contracts. The prosecutors were eager for his cooperation, particularly given his status as the wrong party in multiple respects. Turner leveraged his relationship with your wife and daughter to create a sophisticated smuggling operation, the lead prosecutor explained. We believe he targeted your family specifically because of your company's security contracts. My family was collateral damage in a business move, Russell summarized. Essentially, yes, though the emotional manipulation was particularly calculated. After 4 hours of detailed statements, Russell finally headed toward Eleanor Montgomery's estate in Northern Virginia. The sprawling property had been his childhood home, a place he'd avoided in recent years due to complicated feelings about his father's legacy. Eleanor met him at the door herself, still regal at 76. You look terrible, she greeted him. Thank you, Mother. Always a pleasure. She led him to her study, where a whiskey was already poured. Olivia is resting. The doctor prescribed something for anxiety. Russell nodded. How bad? The wedding cancellation? Socially embarrassing, but manageable. The revelation that her future stepfather was exploiting her? Devastating. The realization that her mother enabled it all? She's processing that one slowly. Russell sipped his drink. And her feelings toward me? Eleanor fixed him with a penetrating stare. Complicated. You were right about Blake, but your methods. She shook her head. Did you have to destroy everything to make your point? Blake was systematically dismantling my life, my family, my company, my legacy. Conventional responses wouldn't have sufficed. There's ruthlessness, then there's scorched earth. You chose the latter. Russell set down his glass. May I see her? Eleanor considered this. She's not ready. Give her time. Time I can provide. Understanding beyond a certain point. Harder. Eleanor's expression softened slightly. She's young, Russell. The betrayal feels absolute from all sides. Blake used her. Vanessa prioritized her own desires. And you? I prioritized justice over her feelings, Russell finished. Over her agency, Eleanor corrected. You made decisions about what was best for her without consulting her. Some threats require immediate action. Perhaps. But remember, my granddaughter is not a hostage to be rescued. She's a woman who made poor choices based on manipulation. There's a difference. Russell nodded slowly. I'll remember that. As he prepared to leave, Eleanor handed him an envelope. From Olivia. She asked me to give it to you if you came. Outside in his car, Russell opened the letter. Dad, it began. I don't know what to say to you. Part of me wants to thank you for exposing Blake before I tied my life to his. Part of me hates you for how you did it. Did you have to wait until the wedding was days away? Did you have to humiliate me so completely? I keep asking myself what was real. Was Patrick's love real? Was Mom's support real? Was Blake's caring real? Was your love real? I don't know anymore. I need time. Maybe we all do. Olivia. Russell folded the letter carefully. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't permanent estrangement either. It was an opening. His next stop was the house he'd shared with Vanessa for over 2 decades. She was waiting for him in the living room, a glass of wine in hand, looking simultaneously defiant and defeated. The conquering hero returns, she said bitterly. Happy with what you've accomplished? Russell studied his wife, still beautiful, still proud, but somehow diminished. That depends on what you think I was trying to accomplish. Destroying my life. Punishing me for falling in love with someone else. Is that what you think this was about? Jealousy. Vanessa looked away. What else? Protection. Blake Turner targeted you to get to me and my company. He used Olivia to facilitate illegal operations. Everything else, the romance, the relationship, the wedding planning, was cover for his real objectives. That's not true, Vanessa insisted, but doubt clouded her expression. Blake loved me, loved Olivia. Blake loved access. You provided social legitimacy. Olivia provided medical cover. I provided security contracts. We were all means to his end. Vanessa's composure cracked. Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, your response was monstrous. You could have come to me privately. Show me evidence. Instead, you orchestrated a public humiliation. Would you have believed me? Or would you have warned Blake, giving him time to cover his tracks? Russell shook his head. You made your choice 3 years ago, Vanessa. You chose deception over honesty, betrayal over loyalty, and you chose revenge over family. Russell considered this. Perhaps we both failed. What happens now? Vanessa asked, her voice small. Divorce, obviously. My lawyer will contact yours. Russell looked around the house that had never quite felt like a home. You can keep this place if you want it. I've moved what matters to me. That's it. 22 years ended with property distribution. What did you expect, Vanessa? Forgiveness? Reconciliation? Some things can't be repaired once broken. Tears filled her eyes. I did love you once. Before the distance, before the endless work trips, before you became more married to your company than to me. And I loved you. But love without loyalty is just sentiment. Russell turned to leave. Goodbye, Vanessa. As he walked out, Vanessa called after him. She won't forgive you, you know. Olivia, you've hurt her too deeply. Russell paused without turning. Maybe, but unlike you and Blake, I never pretended to be something I'm not. She always knew exactly who her father was. Chapter 9. Ashes and Rebirth. 6 months after the wedding that never happened, Russell sat in his new penthouse overlooking the Potomac. The divorce had been finalized with surprising efficiency. Vanessa, too broken by Blake's betrayal and subsequent 15-year prison sentence, to fight over assets. Montgomery Security had not only survived the crisis but emerged stronger, the company's swift response to Blake's infiltration becoming a case study in corporate counterintelligence. Dale had been promoted to co-CEO, allowing Russell to step back from day-to-day operations. The doorbell rang. Russell checked his security monitor, then straightened his tie, a nervous gesture he thought he'd outgrown decades ago. Olivia stood in the hallway, looking older somehow, her eyes carrying a new wariness. She'd enrolled in a trauma medicine fellowship in Baltimore, throwing herself into work with the same intensity Russell had always shown. You look well, Russell said after letting her in. Liar, Olivia replied, but with a faint smile. I look exactly like what I am, someone working 100-hour weeks to avoid thinking about her personal life. The Montgomery special, Russell acknowledged. Can I get you something? Coffee? Something stronger. Coffee's fine. They moved to the kitchen, the silence between them no longer hostile, but not yet comfortable. How's your mother? Russell asked, focusing on the coffee preparation. Managing. The social fallout was significant. Most of her friends chose sides. And Patrick. Olivia's expression tightened. Married Stephanie Williams last month. Apparently, they reconnected at what would have been our wedding weekend. I'm sorry. Are you? Russell handed her the coffee. For your pain, yes. For the rest, no. Olivia sipped her coffee, studying him over the rim. Grandma says you were right about everything, but wrong about how you handled it. Your grandmother has strong opinions. She also says you've been calling her weekly for updates on me. Russell acknowledged this with a nod. I wanted to respect your need for space while ensuring you were all right. Why didn't you just call me directly? Would you have answered? Olivia considered this. Probably not. At least not at first. They moved to the living room, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Nice place, Olivia commented. Very bachelor pad. It serves its purpose. Are you seeing anyone? Russell raised an eyebrow. That's your first personal question? Just curious if you've moved on as efficiently as you dismantled my wedding. The barb found its mark. No, Olivia. I'm not seeing anyone. She nodded, then reached in her bag for an envelope. I brought something. The investigator mom hired found these in Blake's storage unit. Russell opened the envelope to find photographs. Him teaching Olivia to ride a bike at her high school graduation, asleep in a hospital chair when she'd had her appendix removed at 16. He had files on all of us, Olivia explained. Detailed psychological profiles. Notes on how to manipulate us against each other. Her voice caught. He documented everything. When to compliment me, when to mention how busy you were, how to make me feel like you didn't understand me while he did. Russell examined the photos, fury rising anew at the calculated nature of Blake's operation. Psychological warfare. Creating division by exploiting existing tensions. That's what the FBI said. Olivia looked out the window. I've been in therapy, trying to untangle what was real from what was manipulation. And my feelings about you were real. Complicated, but real. She turned back to him. You were distant sometimes, controlling sometimes, but you always loved me. That wasn't Blake's fabrication. No, Russell agreed softly. That never changed. Mom wants me to forgive her. Says she was as much a victim as I was. What do you think? Olivia's expression hardened. I think she had more information than I did. More life experience. More reason to be cautious. Instead, she embraced the fantasy Blake offered. And me? What do you think about what I did? I think you went nuclear when a surgical strike might have sufficed. Russell nodded. Fair assessment. But, Olivia continued, I also think you were right about the threat Blake posed. If the wedding had happened, if his plan had succeeded, she shuddered. I'd be married to a criminal who saw me as an access point, not a person. They sat in silence for a moment, the city lights beginning to illuminate as dusk fell. I'm not ready to forgive you completely, Olivia finally said. The way you did it, letting me get to the edge before pulling the rug out, was cruel. I know, but I'm ready to start rebuilding. She met his eyes directly. Not because what you did was right, but because what we had before all this matters more than how it ended. Russell felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. I'd like that. Ground rules, though, Olivia continued. No more unilateral decisions about my life. No more withholding information for my own good. If you see a threat, you tell me directly. Agreed, Russell said immediately. And in return, I promise to listen. To consider that your perspective might come from experience, not control. It wasn't perfect reconciliation, but it was a beginning, a foundation to rebuild what had been broken. Would you like to stay for dinner? Russell asked. I can't cook worth a damn, but I know a good delivery service. Olivia smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes for the first time. I'd like that. And Dad, I'm thinking of buying a camera. Maybe you could recommend one. Russell smiled back, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. I know just the one. In the kitchen, preparing drinks while they waited for food, Russell glanced at his phone. A text from Dale. Turner denied appeal. Sentence stands. Financial recovery proceedings starting next month. We win. Russell put the phone away without responding. Some victories were measured not in defeats dealt, but in relationships preserved. He'd lost a wife who had never truly been his. He'd nearly lost a daughter who always had been. And he'd learned, finally, where to direct his ruthlessness and where to offer mercy. Outside, the city lights sparkled like stars brought down to earth, possibilities illuminating what had once been darkness. "Dad," Olivia called from the living room. "Come look at this sunset. It's amazing." Russell joined his daughter at the window, standing beside her as they watched the days transform into something new. "Beautiful," he agreed. And for the first time in a very long time, it was. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.